Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Data Standard Audio Experience. Today we have Neelam Mohanty, a digital and big data architect at Nationwide. And today we're going to be speaking more about the big topic of machine learning within enterprise search. So welcome to the show, Neelam. I'm excited to speak with you.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for having me on. I'm really excited to be a part of this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're so excited to have you on the show just to learn more about everything that you're doing right now. So, yeah, can you tell us more about your background and go ahead and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So, my name's Neelam Mohanty. I currently work as an architect in technology within an insurance company nationwide. My focus areas have been big data and digital technologies. Throughout my career, I've kind of prided myself in learning different technologies, having that holistic perspective. And this year, I pushed myself just a little bit more to get a formal education in machine learning from a university. I'm halfway through a 9-month certificate course in machine learning, and it has stretched and grown me in ways that I would never have thought possible, Catherine.
Yeah, definitely. Tell us a little bit more about the certification. I know you told me about a bit about it offline, but it's super exciting stuff that you're doing right now.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm doing it online and it's completely on demand from the University of San Diego, the extension part of it. And I believe we share that university in our background, right? And so they're really covering the fundamentals. Like the course I just completed was linear algebra. The next one is on statistics and probability. Then we've got TensorFlow neural networks. So really getting into the fundamentals of the algorithms and methods.
Yeah, and that's awesome that they were able to kind of implement that into their extension courses because I think it's
Mm,
fairly new. So that's
yes.
awesome that you're doing
Yeah.
this. Yeah. And so I wanted to talk more about just enterprise search. And so what is enterprise search and how does it kind of differ from the search that we usually do between Google or Bing or DuckDuckGo?
Yeah, great question. So the search that we usually do using, Google or Bing or DuckDuckGo or any of the other myriad search engines out there, we call that internet search. Enterprise search is more searching for information or people within the four walls of your corporation. And I say four walls metaphorically. What I mean is the information within your corporation. So that's what enterprise search is. And the biggest fallacy that I face is that there's a perception and expectation that enterprise search should work the same way as internet search. And that's really like comparing apples to oranges. The two of them differ in many ways, and I'll try to explain in layman's language how they differ. The first is in terms of the content. So when you're putting out content on a website on the internet, there's two things you've got going for you. One is you're incentivized to make sure your site is found by search engines, otherwise you won't get any traffic. And the whole reason you're starting a website is probably to get traffic, either for revenue generation by users clicking on ads that you might have placed on your site, or maybe you've got a special focus group that you want to attract to your website because that's where your passion is. But you're incentivized to tag your content, to set it up with the appropriate taxonomy, and to help the search engine find your site. The second thing with the content is how an internet search engine works in ranking and scoring. And if your site has hyperlinks, cross references to other sites, and highly trafficked sites are quoting you, referencing the content in your site, then search engine crawlers typically know that you're a site with high, good quality content, and they will also rank and score you highly. Now, compare that with your corporation and content within your corporation. It's usually not tagged, usually doesn't have really high quality metadata, and there's definitely no cross linking or hyperlinks across different content repositories. So, different challenges in terms of content. The second way they differ is in terms of user behavior and in the volume of queries, right? So if you think of Google, and on average, I think Google gets 40,000 or 50,000 queries per second. So you can think about the number of queries per second and then the search results and then users clicking on search results and the data that you're building up for the algorithm to recognize which one of those clicks is more and more relevant. Versus with an enterprise search, quite a large number of queries are low frequency queries, right? Which means that there's not enough users searching for that content or clicking on it to build up a sizable amount of training data for our machine learning algorithm. So the volume, the user expectation of what a good result is, many times in enterprise search, users already have an idea about the document. So they're searching for the one right document versus with internet search, they're just searching for good enough. And then you're not worrying about user authentication, security, document security, personalization. A lot of that doesn't come into play with internet search. So that's how the two are different.
Yeah, awesome explanation there. And with enterprise search, there's a lot of AI and ML that come with it. So
Mhm.
how is this kind of implemented into enterprise search and how is it important?
Yeah, great question again. So, and you have a degree and a background, so I'll use terms that are maybe a little more technical. There's many ways that AI and ML are used within enterprise search. The first is what I would call NLP, or natural language processing. So, traditionally we would type a query in natural language, what we call human language, in our native language, whether it be English for you and I, or China, or Mandarin, or Dutch for someone else, but the search engine is able to understand that query written in a natural language and is able to translate and interpret it in the back end to understand what information you're searching for. So that's the query intent piece of it, right? And that's the first place where I would say NLP, which is a subset of AI, is used in that ability of the machine to understand the human language. And now it's not just text, it's also speech, right? So we're asking Siri and Google on our mobile phones to go and find places and things to eat for us. And all of that is also NLP. It's actually dealing with ASR, which is automatic speech recognition. So when you're talking about the speech to text translation, so that's one area. The other area is there's machine learning algorithms behind the scenes that are using signals, and signals are just data points or attributes to understand from your behavior, from contextual clues on what documents are of relevance to you. So that's the second area in which it's used. And then the third is recommendations. Most of the enterprise search tools nowadays will give you recommendations that, people like you have been reading this document. Would you also like to read it? And how they come up with people like you, that's a whole topic of discussion in itself. But those are the three areas in a nutshell where AI ML is used within enterprise search.
Yeah, definitely. And NLP and recommender systems is huge within the industry now. So many companies are using one or both or either for just advancing their company. And it's great to see technology always advancing with as technology is just growing. And
Yep.
with that being said, machine learning and AI are also always advancing throughout the past decade. And so how have they changed to kind of help enterprise search?
Yep, great question. So one is NLP and the ability to understand, human query language, which I would say, and then just speech that has advanced tremendously. So we didn't have the capability to understand as many dialects, as many languages as we do today. And you can see that as the interface for search has changed from being pure text based to being now speech and even image recognition. So, search engines now have the ability to pull out features from images and videos and also ingest them and produce them as results for a search query that you might be handling. All of that is pretty recent in the last decade. The other area where we've really seen a major area of growth has been in signal processing. Think of signals as any data point or attributes, but more easily think of them as contextual or behavioral clues that a search engine uses. So, as a corporate enterprise user, we have contextual clues about you when you type a search query. We know the geographical location you're typing it from. We usually know your title, your department, your subject matter expertise in a particular technology or business domain. We also know what past queries you've run, what past documents you've looked at. So those are all contextual clues. And then the behavioral clues are for this query session. How are you refining your query? How long do you usually run a query? When you run a query, what are you clicking on? How long are you viewing something before going back to refine that query? So, the ability of the machine learning algorithms and the search engine to use all of those signals and really come up with information that's relevant and really increase. There's two metrics in search. We call it recall and precision. That has improved tremendously. And for our users, recall is these two metrics. Basically, they deal with getting the all of the relevant results in front of the user, and then the second metric deals with getting just the relevant results and not showing them irrelevant results. So all of that, the advances have really helped with improving the ability of search engines to help increase the user experience.
Yeah, definitely. And I wanted to also kind of just touch on the topic of the different generations and how they kind of deal with the whole privacy and security, because I know you had mentioned that technology now, once you search something, all of your history is there. They're looking at all of your history, they're making recommendations to you. What are your thoughts on just the privacy issues and just like I know the older generation, they're not okay with it because they're saying this is an invasion of privacy, but then the younger generation is saying, I don't care. Like, give me recommendations. Let me buy more things that are of my interest, or let me read more articles that are interest of me. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, that is such an excellent question. And on that one hand, I'm terrified that there's so much information out there about me that someone could find with a Google search that I have not voluntarily put out there. But, someone with the right wherewithal could just find it because of my digital footprint. And on the other hand, I do agree. I enjoy the personalized recommendations that come up in internet search. And so sometimes, I've searched incognito, but then the news feed that shows up isn't really relevant or targeted to my interests versus when I search, without being in incognito mode. I do enjoy the news feed that comes up. And we're talking about internet search at the moment, but it all goes back to your question around privacy. I think with the younger generation, you're right, they are more open to their information being out there. And also because I think they've realized that no matter how much you're, hiding your privacy, you're trying to browse in incognito mode, it takes one website where you log in and the cookie tracking you for all of the search engines to know who you were with your previous browsing history. So you have to be really very careful if you intend to guard that privacy to the extent that it never gets out. And I think the younger generation is just getting more comfortable with that.
Yeah, definitely. Great insight. I know different people kind of had different opinions on that when I asked them about that on the podcast. So it's great to hear your perspective on it as well.
Sure.
And so with just ML and enterprise search and any technology aspect at all, there are always going to be challenges that come with it. So what is the most challenging part of using machine learning with enterprise
Great
search?
question. So, the first, I would say the biggest challenge is really when you're rolling it out new. And you sometimes get into this incorrect positive feedback loop because users, and I'm sure you and I fall in the same category, we have a tendency to click on the topmost result. And when your algorithm is new, it still doesn't have a good handle on the relevant documents that it should be displaying. And your topmost result might not be the right one. But in the beginning, because you don't have enough volume of signals built up, clicking on that topmost result by many users actually gets you into a loop where your search engine thinks that that is the right document and it promotes it even more, and that leads to even more clicks. And so it takes time to build that up. Now, there are ways around it. You can configure your system prior to go live to relevant documents for commonly used queries, but that's only for commonly used queries, right? You wouldn't be able to get that right for all of them. So that's been one challenge that still remains in place. The other challenge is depending on your corporation and how big they are, it could very well be that a different part of your organization has been using a different search engine and now they want to consolidate search engines. And so, one of the challenges we're not quite sure how to tackle yet is how do you export a trained algorithm in another search tool that has been producing relevant results for its users, but now you want to export it from that tool and import it into your tool and make sure that the user experience in terms of relevancy, recall, and precision, it doesn't see a drop. So it's seamless to the users. And that's not an easy task to handle. So those are the two primary challenges that I see.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you so much for sharing more about the challenges that you face or your team face, because I think that's something that more people need to talk about are the challenges that an organization is facing, just because Similar organizations are facing the same challenges. And if everyone just spoke about them more and talked about how they were able to mitigate these challenges, then I think there would be less kind of pushback from machine learning and AI and putting it out into production. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I wanted to kind of stray away from talking about the technical side of everything and talk more about any hobbies or interests that you've been doing just to pass the time. Has there been anything that you've been doing on the weekends just to pass some time?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I've actually loved working from home during the whole lockdown, and I found that I picked up many hobbies. So I started biking. We have some wonderful trails around. So I've been biking during the summers and then doing yoga over the winters. And then more recently, I started learning Sanskrit, which is one of the ancient languages from India. And I recently just learned about how Sanskrit contributed tremendously towards combinatorics and even computational linguistics. And that plays a big role within, natural language processing. So I had no idea about this history. So it was fascinating to learn that.
Yeah, that's definitely awesome. Are you learning just how to speak the language or the reading writing side of it?
So the first level is mostly spoken to get you familiar with speaking the language. And then I think as you progress up with the levels, it does get into reading and writing. But right now we're unspoken.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And learning a different language is also very difficult, I know. So that's awesome that you were able to kind of pick that up and start learning that because I know we do have a lot more time on our hands now since everyone's kind of remote and at home just working. So
Yep,
the commute isn't as bad anymore. Yeah.
exactly.
But thank you so much for being on the show today. Where can everybody connect with you online?
On LinkedIn, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I love to collaborate and network. Please find me on LinkedIn and send me an invite. I'd love to collaborate.
Yeah, definitely. And to our audience, for more information on the data standard, you can find us at www.datastandard.io, as well as our LinkedIn and YouTube channel. So thank you so much for joining us today. It was such a pleasure to have you on the show today, Neelam, and I hope to speak to you again soon.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for running these high quality podcasts on the data standard. I've listened to a few and I'm very impressed at the work you folks are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.